$1 million for her. That's how it started the night. A powerful billionaire bought a single mother like she was an object, not a human being. And as she stood under the blinding lights, hearing men bid for her future, something inside her shattered. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that behind those tearful eyes burned a storm of secrets and vengeance. Tonight, he thought he owned her. Tomorrow, he'd discover she was the one who could destroy him. Or save him. The room glittered like a cathedral made of glass and money. Men in tailored suits raised their paddles for art, cars, and rare wines. But when the final item appeared, a partnership with a woman named Amelia Hart, the crowd turned curious. She stood under the chandelier's blinding light, her posture composed, her hands trembling only slightly. Her dress was simple, pale blue against a sea of diamonds and sequins, and yet somehow she was the only one who didn't seem to belong. Nathan Cole didn't plan to stay long. Charity events were just another way to polish a tarnished world. He leaned back in his chair, detached, as if his tuxedo were a uniform in the evening, a duty. He had built Cole Industries from steel and ambition. He understood numbers, not people. But when the auctioneer announced her project, Quinn Water, clean water for every village, his gaze lifted for the first time. The woman spoke not with confidence but with conviction, her voice fragile yet steady, like glass refusing to break. The bids began. 100,000. 2. 4. Laughter filled the hall, playful, shallow, indulgent. Amelia's smile didn't reach her eyes. She wasn't supposed to be there. The organizers had listed her project as a novelty item, unaware they'd turned her work and her dignity into a performance. When the bidding slowed at 500,000, the auctioneer tapped his gavel. Going once? Nathan's voice cut through the air. 1 million. A stunned silence fell. Every head turned. He didn't blink, didn't smirk. The auctioneer hesitated, then slammed the gavel down. Sold! Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Amelia stood frozen, her throat tight. He rose from his seat, adjusting his cufflinks, as if nothing had happened. When their eyes met, she saw neither pride nor pity, only exhaustion. A man who'd lost too much and forgotten why he still wanted more. After the auction, they met briefly near the marble staircase. You didn't have to do that, she said, clutching her purse. I didn't do it for you, he replied calmly. I did it for the project. I bought time, not people. Her jaw tightened. Then you overpaid. Time can't be bought. Something in her tone, quiet defiance wrapped in grace, unsettled him. No one had spoken to Nathan Cole like that in years. Most people smiled, agreed, or disappeared. She did none of those things. 2 days later, they met again at a law office overlooking the Thames. The rain streaked down the glass as they signed the 12-month partnership agreement. The lawyer, a balding man with too much charm, joked, "You two sound like opposites. That's how sparks happen." Neither smiled. "I'm not looking for love," Nathan said, scanning the final clause. "Just someone who understands purpose." "I don't believe in love," Amelia replied softly. "It's the reason my family lost everything." When the papers were signed, he extended his hand. Her fingers hesitated, then touched his, brief, formal, electric. The air between them held a silence that felt like thunder before a storm. He left first. Outside, the rain hit his face cold and clean, and for a fleeting second, he wondered what it might feel like to stop fighting the world. Across the street, Amelia stepped into a taxi, clutching the contract to her chest as if it might burn through her palms. No contract can bind the human heart, she thought, but maybe it can break one. The Cole estate stretched across acres of manicured lawns and silent corridors. When Amelia arrived a week later with her daughter, Lily, the gates closed behind them with a soft metallic sigh. The mansion loomed ahead, beautiful, cold, precise. It was a house designed by a man who trusted walls more than people. Lily's laughter echoed through the marble hall as she darted from room to room, her small shoes tapping like raindrops. "Mom, this place is huge," she said, wide-eyed. Nathan appeared at the landing above, his expression unreadable. "She's welcome to explore," he said. "Just stay out of the study upstairs." Dinner that evening felt like a performance neither had rehearsed for. Nathan sat at the head of the long oak table, posture perfect, fork and knife aligned like weapons. Amelia guided Lily gently through etiquette, pretending the silence didn't suffocate her. "Mr. Cole," Lily asked suddenly, "why doesn't your house have any music?" Nathan's knife paused mid-air. "Music distracts from focus," he said. Her mother smiled faintly. "Sometimes a song saves a bad day." That night, behind his closed office doors, Nathan opened an old playlist he hadn't touched in 3 years. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat filled the room. He closed his eyes and let it hurt. Days passed. Their lives orbited each other in quiet rhythm, cold mornings, careful exchanges, unspoken tension. Amelia spent her days drafting designs and writing proposals for the Quinn Water project. Nathan reviewed them with precision, crossing out, rewriting, but never explaining. When she suggested visiting the construction site to understand the workers' needs, he refused. "Leaders don't belong in the mud," he said. "Then you'll never understand what keeps people standing in it," she replied. The silence that followed wasn't anger. It was something heavier: recognition. One rainy afternoon, Nathan returned early and saw them outside in the garden. Lily was playing with soil, and Amelia knelt beside her, shielding the child with her coat as thunder rolled above. The sight pierced through him. His late wife had once done the same, years ago, before she died, bringing their child into a world he'd made too cold to survive. He turned away before they saw him. That night, a vase of white lilies appeared on the kitchen counter. No note, no explanation. Amelia touched the petals gently. She didn't need one. Still, their ghosts lingered. Nathan's journal was filled with guilt. He never voiced his wife's death, the unborn son he'd never met. Amelia's past haunted her, too. The memory of her father's hand clutching his chest as the news of Coal Industries' acquisition broke, his empire gone overnight. He died the next morning. They lived under the same roof, two strangers bound by silent grief. One evening, Amelia returned drenched after a field inspection. Fever hit before midnight. Nathan found her shivering on the sofa, skin pale. He called the doctor, stayed through the night, his coat draped over her shoulders. When she woke, dawn spilled through the curtains. Nathan was asleep in the chair beside her, head tilted back, exhaustion softening the lines on his face. On the nightstand sat a note: "Take the medicine, and stop working in the rain." She smiled through the haze of fever, folding the note carefully as if it were fragile glass. That night, she wrote in her journal, "He lives, as if punishment keeps him breathing. But if justice exists, could I ever forgive the man who destroyed my father?" And across the hall, Nathan penned his own: "She makes me forget how to count the hours." The mansion was still, but the silence had changed. It no longer echoed. It breathed. The pilot system hissed to life and the water ran clear. In the yard behind the small factory, Amelia stood with her team, raincoats flapping in the wind, explaining the flow rates and the mineral balance to a half-circle of workers. Nathan watched from the edge of the crowd. She didn't posture, she didn't sell. She taught hands steady, voice plain, eyes lit with a confidence he hadn't felt in himself for years. On the drive back, he proposed doubling the footprint, moving faster, folding in 3 more counties. She shook her head. "Scale can be a kind of violence," she said. "Grow too fast and you crush the thing you're trying to save." He answered without thinking, reflex sharp as steel. "Nothing loses its soul if you keep control." The word landed between them like an old bruise. She turned to the window and let the city swallow the conversation. 2 days later, she came to Coal Industries for specifications buried in records she didn't own. The archive was colder than the rest of the building, rows of gray cabinets, the hum of a tired fluorescent light. She traced labels with her finger until a tab snagged her nail. Hart Manufacturing Acquisition. The letters chilled her skin. She told herself she was only looking for a supplier's ledger. Then the folder slid open. Her father's name appeared first, Martin Hart, typewritten, clean, impersonal. Contract schedules, debt calls, a freight list, attached memos in a thin, slanted hand. Force discount by quarter end. Accelerate lien on warehouse #3. The final note, small and almost casual. Hart won't fight if we squeeze the plant. Victor Cole's signature burned through the page like acid. The room tilted. Amelia pressed a hand to the steel shelf, dizzy with a memory. Her father at the kitchen table, a glass of water he never drank. His chest, seizing as headlines rolled across the TV. She closed the file, reopened it, as if the words might change on the second reading. They did not. That night the weather broke hard. Wind shouldered the eaves, rain drummed the windows, and the mansion's lights flickered, then died. Amelia sat in the dark living room with one lamp still warm, the file's ghost still on her hands. When Nathan came in, rain glittered on the shoulders of his coat. He saw her face and stopped. "What happened?" he asked. She stared past him. "Have you ever wondered if the thing you protect with your life killed someone else's?" He reached for sense. "What are you?" She stood. "Good night." Upstairs, He searched his own history, the one he'd refused to open. The old lockbox yielded too easily. His mother's journal lay on top, its edges softened by time. Your father can win every boardroom, one-line read, but he will lose you if he forgets what a promise costs. Below it, photocopies he'd never seen. Schedules, liens, letters, hard again and again. The shape of the truth formed like a storm on a radar, undeniable, black. Sometime after midnight, the power failed completely. The corridor was a dim tunnel of blue window light and thunder. Amelia stepped out at the same time Nathan did, both drawn by the same restless gravity. He was holding the folder now. She didn't flinch. "I know," he said, voice low. "I didn't know before, but I know now. What my father did, what my name did." She swallowed once, the smallest movement. "I've tried not to hate you," she whispered. "I hate what coal means, and I hate that I can't hate you and still breathe." All their careful distance collapsed. There was no speech left in either of them, only the wild, human instinct to reach for warmth when the world is cold. The hall became a shoreline where two storms met. His hands at her waist, her mouth against the apology he hadn't learned to say, the press of ribs and ribs, a fever made of grief and need. Outside, lightning stitched white lines in the rain. Inside, they stopped thinking. There was only skin, and the racket of both their hearts, and a little silence afterwards where neither dared move. Morning came like judgment. The house smelled of damp stone and coffee. Amelia woke to the sound of rain easing, a slice of gray sky, and Nathan on the balcony in a shirt he hadn't buttoned, the file beside his knee. He didn't turn when she rose, didn't soften. "Last night didn't happen," he said, eyes on the garden. "We'll respect the contract, we'll work, we'll forget." The words were a blade he held to his own throat. She dressed without hurry, each movement careful, each breath measured, and faced him with a calm that shook. "You can bury a night," she said, "but not a consequence." He closed his eyes once, as if from a bright pain. "Do what you need to do." She nodded. So she did. She packed quietly. Lily folded her drawings into a backpack, confused by the speed of a goodbye she couldn't name. At the door, Amelia didn't ask him to stop her, and he didn't try. She left the key and the silence and the man who had finally looked at his ghosts. When the car pulled away, Nathan watched his reflection in the glass rather than the taillights, an empty figure in a house that had won too often to learn how to keep anything. The rain thinned to mist. In 2 different rooms, at 2 different desks, they each wrote a sentence that would not save them. "If there is justice, teach me how to face it," she wrote. "She makes me want to be a person my mother would recognize," he wrote. The mansion exhaled and went still again, as if the night had been a rumor that daylight did not believe. A week stretched long and airless. The mansion found its old order the way a river finds its bed after a flood, clean, exact, lifeless. Nathan routed messages through his assistant. Meetings replaced meals. Amelia's side of the table remained a geography of absence. An empty chair, a folded cloth napkin, the water glass no one touched. Lily tried to restore the shape of the house with laughter and crayons. "Is Mr. Sirius mad at you?" she asked one night, head on her mother's shoulder. "No, sweetheart," Amelia murmured. "He's just busy." Across the hall, Nathan paused outside the playroom and then kept walking, afraid of what his hands might remember if he picked up a toy. On a gray morning, Amelia rolled her suitcase to the foyer. Nathan stepped from the study as if summoned by the sound of wheels on stone. "Where will you go?" he asked. She didn't lie. "Someplace I don't have to see your father's shadow when you stand in a doorway." No argument came. He nodded once. The door closed with a sigh that felt like the house giving up. Oxford was smaller, softer, honest about its weather. Amelia found a 2-bedroom on a quiet street where the buses sighed and the neighbors watered their window boxes by hand. She took a short contract with a startup that built irrigation sensors for small farms. The founder was Ethan Ward, a man who listened more than he spoke and offered help as if it were an ordinary errand and not a rescue. He had known her father in the days when Martin Hart's hands were still stained with machine oil and hope. Ethan brought soup the first week and a second-hand bike for Lily the next. He changed a flickering kitchen light without making it an act of chivalry. Months later, in a park where the grass yellowed at the edges, he said, almost shy, "I don't want to replace anyone. I just want you to know that someone believes you deserve gentleness." She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But her shoulders lowered in a way he recognized as trust. The body keeps its own calendar. One morning on a job site, Amelia gripped the railing as the world tilted heat behind her eyes, a wave of nausea, a fizzing in her hands. The clinic smelled like paper and antiseptic. The doctor smiled kindly at a screen that showed a bright, pulsing seed. 8 weeks, she said. The math wrote itself in Amelia's head. Rain, thunder, the corridor. A hand she had not forgotten even when she tried. Outside, she stood under a sky that couldn't decide whether to clear. I tried to leave you, she whispered, not to the man but to the news in her blood. And you followed anyway. In London, Nathan worked the hours other people slept. The folder never left his desk. He traced his father's signature until the ink seemed to move. When he could no longer hold the walls up with denial, he went to the one person who had profited most from Victor's ruthlessness, an old financial advisor with a voice like gravel and teeth too bright for his age. The man did not bother with euphemisms. We broke hard on purpose, he said, shrugging. Leverage. Timing. We called in paper before they could refinance. Your father wanted that plant because it scared him. Nathan felt something in his chest come unmoored. In the elevator, he braced his hand against the mirror and saw his father's mouth in his own reflection. He stepped down as CEO the next morning, handing authority to a deputy who looked relieved and afraid. In Oxford, time folded into small, careful rituals. Amelia ate toast she didn't want. She told Lily the truth that belonged to a child. There's a baby coming. Lily clapped her hands and asked if babies liked peanut butter. In the quiet hours after bedtime, Amelia wrote questions on the back of bills. What will I say when he asks? Is a name, a destiny, or a direction? She closed her eyes and saw a balcony, a shirt unbuttoned wrong, a man who had chosen the hardest sentence for himself and made her carry the rest. That evening, Ethan found her sitting on the floor with a jar of pickles and a look that scared him. What happened? He asked. She let the words out whole. I'm pregnant. He sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder, as if keeping a promise he hadn't asked her to make. I know it isn't mine, he said gently, but if you'll let me, I can be here anyway. She laughed a small, breaking laugh. You're so good it makes me feel like a thief. He shook his head. No, it makes you human. Across the city, Nathan stood at a window he never opened and watched the same rain. He wrote a letter he had no address for. I don't know how to undo a name, it said, but I can build something that answers it. He didn't sign it. He folded it into his mother's journal and closed the cover, as if that could keep the next part from happening too quickly. Night fell with a patient steadiness. In 2 separate houses, 2 separate rooms, they listened to the identical sound of water threading gutters and remembered the corridor where everything began and broke. Neither knew the other had their hand pressed to their stomach, hers over new life, his over a hollow he was finally willing to acknowledge. In the dark, a line drew itself between them that no door could close. The story did not soften. It merely paused, as storms do, before the next hit of thunder. Sunlight slid over the old Oxford rooftops as Amelia stepped out of the clinic with a sonogram pressed to her chest. On the paper, a white pulse flickered no larger than a bean, yet it felt like someone had set down a star inside her. The doctor's voice had been gentle, careful not to crowd the moment. Everything looked healthy. Avoid stress. Rest when she could. She nodded, grateful for the script, terrified by the truth behind it. The father was a man whose last name had once emptied her home and stopped her father's heart. That night, she sat on the balcony of the small flat while Lily slept in a tangle of blankets and soft breaths. The street below murmured with buses and bicycles, the ordinary kindness of a city that didn't know her history. She wrote a line in her journal. I wasn't drunk that night. I was unguarded because he looked at me like the world hadn't broken him, and then tore the page out and fed it to a match. Smoke curled into the dark, and in the smoke she saw her father at the kitchen table, his knuckles white around a cooling cup of tea. Loving a coal is handing your enemy the knife, he'd said without words, and still, somehow, here she was. Ethan Ward kept showing up with quiet reasons that didn't ask anything back. He took Lily to the swings on Saturdays. He fixed the oven when it clicked and refused to catch. He sent a message before long field days. Need a ride? Need a hand? Need a laugh? One afternoon he found her sitting at her desk long after everyone had gone, staring through a spreadsheet as if it were an ocean. You're holding something heavy, he said, taking the chair across from her. You don't have to tell me what it is. Just don't carry it alone. She cried then, not loudly, not for long, the kind of cry that comes when someone finally names the weight without prying it open. She still didn't tell him. Silence felt like a promise she didn't know how to break. In London, the Cole mansion learned how to echo again. Nathan walked room to room as if practicing absence. He ate at the kitchen island. He left the study lights on, fell asleep on the sofa, woke with his tie still cinched. In his mother's will, he found a single sentence in blue ink. If you must choose between power and love, choose the one that leaves you with fewer funerals, and he folded the page so it wouldn't cut him every time he looked. Guilt without movement is vanity, he decided. So he moved. He visited the ruins of old acquisitions, shook hands with men who refused to shake his, paid out of his own accounts to mend what could be mended. At night he wrote letters to Amelia he never sent. I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but if you need it, the whole world can carry your father's name. Fate refused to wait for their permissions. At a local fundraiser, the kind with paper cups and a raffle for a toaster, Amelia finished a short talk about field filtration and stepped off stage into a face she recognized from newspapers and nightmares. Victor Cole smiled as if he'd discovered a smudge on his cuff. Martin Hart's daughter, he said, tasting each word. History has such a charming way of repeating itself. He leaned in, breath warm with mint and malice. If you're planning to balance the books, think about the child in your belly. The blood left her hands. She managed to walk away without stumbling, but her heart didn't find its footing for the rest of the night. He knew. If Victor knew, the secret could be everywhere by morning. She packed a suitcase as rain gathered over the town, folding clothes with a care that looked like anger. Scotland was far enough. She thought her mother's house. A quiet birth. No headlines. Ethan arrived to return Lily's library books and stopped in the doorway at the sight of the open case. Running fixes geography, he said softly. It doesn't fix the story your child will one day ask you to tell. She sank onto the bed. I don't know if this baby is punishment or a gift. He sat beside her, elbows on his knees. Sometimes the gift comes wrapped in the thing you feared most. That doesn't make it less of a gift. She stayed. The decision didn't bring peace. It only stopped the motion. She learned her body's new clock. The afternoon drowsiness, the midnight clarity, the sudden sweetness of strawberries, the hum of fear under every quiet moment. At odd hours, she stood by the window with her hand over the small swell that hadn't yet announced itself to the world. Across a city she did not visit, a man stood at another window with his palm against cold glass, wondering if redemption could arrive before the truth did. They did not know they were mirroring each other, two people listening for the same heartbeat through different walls. Sometimes life chooses the exact place where love fell to stand up again. The wind moaned through the ribs of the old heart plant, the corrugated roof ticking like a cooling engine. Nathan stepped over a coil of rusted cable and picked up a fallen nameplate, the letters dulled by dust. Heart Industries built with honor. He whispered the last word aloud, once, twice, a third time, until it stopped sounding like a slogan and started sounding like an accusation. Honor without repair is theater. He slid the plate into his coat as if it could burn a brand into his chest and walked back out into daylight with a plan he hadn't earned and would not abandon. He liquidated share. He cut the blind luxuries that had padded his days. He formed the Martin Hart Memorial Fund and signed the first batch of contracts without his last name appearing anywhere near the letterhead. The goal was simple enough to be impossible. Restore what Victor Cole had broken. Not in speeches. In payrolls. In leases renegotiated without traps. In machines lifted back to their rails. His lawyer tried to steer him toward safer optics. You could structure this so Cole Industries benefits, the man said. Turn it into a PR victory. The street rewards narratives. Nathan shook his head. The street can go hungry. My father took something that fed people. I'm late, not lost. At night, he wrote another letter to the woman who had taught him the price of the word decent. He wrote to his mother, too, on the back of an old foundation brochure. You told me love is the only tool that makes a man smaller and better at the same time. I laughed at that. I don't laugh anymore. A woman I hurt has made me want to be someone you'd claim. He sealed the letter in an envelope addressed to a building that no longer existed and left it on the mantel like an altar. Meanwhile, the months gathered in Amelia's body with a quiet insistence. Lily talked to the baby through her mother's shirt, announcing the day's weather and whether the neighbor's cat had returned. Ethan learned to read the subtle alarm in Amelia's eyes and step in before she had to ask. He took measurements for a crib. He argued gently with midwives about schedules. One evening, as they shared a bowl of strawberries at the kitchen counter, he asked the question without frills. If he came back different, would you forgive him? She considered the fruit in her hand as if it might answer for her. Forgiveness is a high place, she said. I'm not sure I know the climb, but when sleep came, it brought an image she could not banish. Nathan sitting alone in a cold factory, his shoulder hunched, his hand on a photograph of her father, A man asking a dead stranger for permission to change. Victor refused to allow the world to soften. He found her again, in a cafe this time, with the careful posture of a man who had always won and still assumed the future would obey. "Keep quiet about the child," he said, sliding a card toward her with a number written in a tiny, exquisite hand. "Start over somewhere warm. Let my son live a life appropriate to him." She pushed the card back. "I don't want your money. I want my child to grow up without your shadow." He smiled without moving his eyes. Shadows are educational. She left before the tremor in her knees could show. The day the heart plant stirred again, the sky was the kind of blue that makes grief look like a past season. A banner hung awkwardly over the refurbished gate. Martin Hart Memorial Fund Reopening. Amelia came because the invitation had arrived without a sender, its language too spare to be corporate. She took a seat near the back, one hand resting over the life that turned beneath it, and watched the man she had promised never to watch again step up to a low stage. Nathan didn't perform contrition. He listed names: foremen, machinists, bookkeepers, men and women who had lost pensions and houses when coal squeezed a balance sheet. He named the harm. Then he said the only line that mattered. "There are debts money can't pay. I don't know how to clear those. This is the best beginning I can afford." The crowd applauded because hope is a habit, and people are quick to practice it when given a chance. Amelia didn't clap. She cried, quietly, the way a person cries when their body makes the decision their mind hasn't signed. After the ribbon fell and the machines thumped awake, he found her by a stack of pallets, where oil scent and sawdust tried to make a new memory over an old one. He didn't reach for her hands. He kept his at his sides. "I'm not here to ask for us," he said, voice even. "I'm here to ask for the child, if I'm allowed to use that word. I don't want him born into a feud. I don't want my father's name to be the first story he hears." She studied him as if trying to detect a seam where the old man had been stitched to the new one. The anger hadn't vanished. Anger never does. But the scaffolding around it had changed. "If you mean that," she said, palms spread over the roundness beneath her coat, "then stay. Not for me, for him. And staying doesn't mean standing beside me only when it's gentle. It means showing up when it's 3 a.m., and there's nothing to fix but fear." He nodded, relief not breaking his face, just loosening it. "I can do 3 a.m. I've learned to be awake then." They stood together, not touching, watching steam rise from the vents like breath in winter. Over the fences, the town listened to the factory's first song in years. Somewhere a boy kicked a football against a wall and shouted when it bounced back true. The day felt ordinary in the way miracles often do when they're wearing work clothes. Nathan took the nameplate from his coat and set it on a windowsill where anyone could see it. Amelia followed the motion and understood the vow. Not to erase what had been, but to remember it where it could not hide. Sometimes penance is a posture, not a speech. Sometimes the only way to atone is to keep showing up with your hands open. The smoke above the building drifted white and clean, and for the first time since a night of lightning and ruin, the future did not feel like an accusation. It felt like a door they might, with care, learn how to open. Wind slammed the trees flat against the road, signage rattled like tin prayers, and the wipers on Amelia's car could not keep up. The first contraction cut her in two without warning. She gripped the wheel, breathing short, counting like the midwife had taught her, but numbers scattered in the white noise of rain. "Not now," she said through her teeth, easing the car toward the shoulder. Lightning stitched the sky. The radio hissed and died. Another contraction rose like a tide and broke. Miles away in London, Nathan stood in the fund's office watching the storm rip the city into glass and water. The traffic report crackled. All routes between Oxford and London blocked. The sentence didn't finish in his mind. It turned into motion. He grabbed his coat and keys and drove into the weather, as if it were a fact he could negotiate down. Ethan's phone buzzed and stuttered. "I think it's time." Amelia's voice came in fragments, breath hitching. "Church off the A, 40 can't." The line went dead. He didn't waste another second. Flooded intersections, stalled cars, a horn blaring uselessly behind him, he threaded through all of it with the kind of calm that only love or terror teaches. Amelia's car finally shuddered to a stop near a stone church that looked abandoned to weather and ivy. She managed the steps inside, one hand on the rail, the other pressed hard to her belly, as if she could hold the child in by strength alone. Another contraction doubled her. She went to her knees on the cold nave floor. "Please," she said to no one, to everyone, her father, the baby, the impossible man who had set this life in motion. Ethan reached her first. "I've got you," he said, lifting her gently, his jacket useless against the rain. He shouted for help into the storm, but sound went nowhere. He checked his phone. No bars. It's okay. He lied with a steadiness born of kindness. We'll get through the next 2 minutes, then the 2 after that. The doors blew inward, and Nathan stumbled in, soaked through, eyes wide and a face that had learned too many forms of fear. He took in the scene, the ruin of the roof, the candles someone had once left on the altar, Ethan's arm under Amelia's shoulders, and moved without being invited. She needs a hospital, he said, already knowing the answer. Ethan shook his head. Roads are gone. Do you know what you're doing? Nathan swallowed. No, but I can follow instructions. A parish phone in a side office still had a faint line. The emergency operator's voice came thin and tinny, a lighthouse at the far edge of the storm. Clean towels, boiled water if you can. Time the contractions. You may have to deliver. The word deliver made the world small and holy and terrified. They made a room of that knave. Ethan braced Amelia's back and let her crush his hand. Nathan stripped off his ruined shirt for clean cloth, found a dusty baptismal bowl, and filled it with boiled water from the old kettle in the vestry, turned his cufflinks into clamps with gauze and patience. Between contractions, Amelia's eyes found his. I hate what your name did, she rasped, and I hate that I can't hate you and still want to live. He bowed his head as if accepting a sentence. Don't spend yourself on me. Spend it on him. Or her, she hissed, and then the next wave took her, and there was no language left. The storm and the labor synchronized pressure, release, pressure, release until time became a belt tightening around the 3 of them. Nathan's voice went low and practical under the operator's halting guidance. Breathe with me, Amelia. Good. Again. You're doing this. We're witnesses. She swore, then laughed, then screamed, then leaned into the pain like a runner hitting a hill. If I don't make it, she began, and Nathan cut her off, his hands steady, his eyes not. Don't write endings in the middle. A thin, fierce cry cut the thunder. It was not loud. It was complete. Nathan's hands trembled as he lifted a small, red, furious miracle into the light. Amelia collapsed back, tears and rain indistinguishable. Ethan laughed and covered his mouth with his free hand. The operator's far-off cheer broke into static. Nathan wrapped the child, cleared his airway as instructed, and for a moment did nothing but look. I'm sorry I'm late, he whispered, the apology he had meant for 2 lifetimes pressed into one sentence. I'm here now. He laid the baby on Amelia's chest, and the tiny body fought its way to the warmth it recognized. Ethan wiped his eyes and shook his head at the sky and at the strange math of love. At least you arrived, he said to Nathan, not unkind. By dawn, the storm ran out of words. A ranger truck braved the road. Paramedics folded the church back into the century where it belonged and ferried them to the hospital. The fluorescent lights there looked indecent after candlelight and lightning. Amelia drifted in and out, the world reduced to skin and breath and the small weight on her breast. Nathan stood watch, getting out of the way, getting in the way when asked, signing forms, refusing coffee, remembering to breathe. Victor arrived like a verdict in an expensive coat. He took one look through the glass and the old greed flared. That child is a coal, he said to the nurse, then to Nathan, then to the air itself. He comes home. Nathan stepped between. No. The word surprised even him with its solidity. You took a company, a pension fund, a man's pride. You don't take a childhood. Victor's mouth tightened into the shape of an old cruelty. Charity won't feed a legacy. Legacy won't feed a child, Nathan said. Get out. For the first time in his reign of rooms, Victor found himself at the wrong end of a door closing. In the quiet that followed, Ethan stood in the corridor and watched through glass. Amelia asleep. Nathan seated beside her, one big hand folded around hers, the baby's fist a button between them. He smiled, the soft, broken smile of a man who knows where the story doesn't need him to stand. Maybe he's the part that knows how to mend you, he said under his breath, and turned down the hall, his footsteps tucked into the hum of hospital machines. The storm had rinsed the city clean. Morning poured through the windows, white and forgiving. Nathan rested his head on the bedrail and listened to 2 steady breaths, one woman, one child, and let the sound change him. By noon, the headlines had found their shape. Here to cold dynasty found in abandoned church with Hart's daughter. Numbers slid red on screens. In a boardroom that smelled of cologne and panic, Victor threw the printout down like a gauntlet. You are dismantling what I built, he said. Nathan didn't sit. No, I'm giving it back its soul. Victor laughed once, no humor in it. I killed Hart with paper. You'll be easier. The world eats men who moralize. Nathan stepped closer until the old man had to tilt his head to hold eye contact. Then let it eat me. I'm done swallowing others so I can stand taller. The slap came quick and neat, a trick learned in academy days. Nathan didn't flinch. He set his access card on the table and slid it forward. You can keep the keys. I'll keep the line I sleep on. He turned and left the room with the slow, even gait of a man who had finally put down a weight he'd mistaken for spine. Outside, microphones bloomed like metal flowers. Amelia braced herself in Oxford as cameras leaned over hedges and strangers rehearsed her motives aloud. She almost ran again, felt the old muscle twitch, then stilled it. Ethan returned to stand on her front step and redirect questions with the patience of stone. She scheduled a brief statement at the community hall. No stage, no backdrop, just folding chairs and the awkward kindness of neighbors. I didn't get pregnant for money, she said into a cheap microphone. I got pregnant because I believed for one night that a man named Cole had a human heart. I still believe it, or I want to. That's enough truth for me. The room held its breath and then exhaled. Gossip needs more friction than that. The next morning, Nathan called a press conference and used it to resign. He signed documents that moved his voting shares into a trust named for Martin Hart, with covenants too boring for news but too binding for reversal. He announced a name for his son that did not erase anyone, Leo Hart Cole. He spoke only 24 words that mattered. My father built with power. I will try to build with character. If we fail, let us fail paying debts we've owed too long. No applause came at first. People were busy recalibrating. Then one pair of hands, then five, and then a room doing the small, brave thing of agreeing to consider a different ending. In the hospital garden, where storm-beaten roses had lifted their heads again, Amelia sat with Leo asleep against her, and Lily tracing patterns on her mother's sleeve. Nathan approached without ceremony and stood next to the bench like a hired guard. You think it's over? She asked, eyes on the roses. No, he said, but I think, for once, it started correctly. She studied the man beside her, measuring what the last days had carved away and what they'd revealed. Victor was nowhere in his posture. It was all Ruth, his mother, quiet strength and a willingness to be small when smallness told the truth better. I won't come back for the child alone, she said. I come back for the man who stood between his father and a door, for the man who showed up when it was 3 a.m. and nothing needed fixing but fear. He went to one knee, not as a performance, but because the height difference of the bench made it easier to look up into forgiveness. He touched her hand as if it were already occupied with work, with life, with another's hand, and asked nothing. I made you stop believing in people, he said, voice gone hoarse from storms and sleepless nights. Thank you for still believing in life. She brushed a damp curl off his forehead. Belief doesn't vanish. It migrates. Send. Leo woke long enough to offer the shy, reflexive smile that babies give the world before they learn to ration it. The sound Amelia made was the softest thing she had ever said. Lily giggled and announced that her brother smelled like warm bread. The four of them laughed, the kind of laughter that makes room for grief without inviting it to speak. Victor, of course, tried again. He called in directors, lawyers, a columnist he'd carried for years. But paper only goes so far against action, and Nathan had outflanked him with a weapon Victor had never trained against: surrender. The trust instruments were tidy cages. The plant's smokestacks exhaled clean. Workers clocked in with old badges reissued new. The world, which loves a fall, found it had a smaller appetite for a quiet rise. A week later, Amelia carried Leo through the Hart Foundation gates with Lily at her side, and Nathan a step behind, his hands empty and ready. The refurbished floor hummed. Steam drifted white. The sign over the entrance read, "Not without sentiment," rebuilt with compassion. Nathan rested his palm against the brick where the old nameplate had been reinstalled and said softly, to himself and to the boy on Amelia's shoulder, "My father thought steel was the strongest thing in the world. I was wrong with him. It's the heart. It always was." They walked the perimeter together. The woman who had learned not to run, the man who had learned how to stop, a girl who trusted that storms end, and a boy who had entered the world proving it. Behind them, the past did not vanish. It followed, as all pasts do, but it had been taught a better pace. It had been asked to be quiet while the present spoke. 6 months after the storm, morning light poured through the narrow window of Oxford General and settled on the bed where Victor Cole lay smaller than his legend, hair gone white, mouth slack from a stroke that had taken his words. Nathan stood at the rail a long time without speaking. When the attending murmured that it wouldn't be long, he nodded and took his father's hand. surprised by how light it felt. "You made men bow," he said softly. "All I want is for you to lift your eyes once." A tear slid from the old man's temple into his hairline. It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't enough, but it was something, and in that smallness Nathan felt the cycle loosen. Life elsewhere did what life does. Amelia taught a small cohort of students how to turn dirty water clear with sand, charcoal, and patience. Lily practiced scales until the house learned to breathe with the metronome. And Leo, fat on milk and weather, pulled himself from couch to table, like a sailor testing legs on land. Ethan came by with spare parts and jokes, and an ease that no longer asked to be anything more than ballast. One afternoon, Nathan walked across the quad. No flowers, just a folder. "I want to fund your program," he said. The words even, the eyes unguarded. "Not with coal money, with the years I owe." She let the silence work, then accepted without ceremony. Between them, the ledger turned into a shared budget. They held a dinner because normalcy is a skill you practice. 5 chairs around a small table. Amelia passing roasted carrots, Lily comparing punchlines, Ethan topping off glasses, Nathan learning how to laugh at the right places. The first minutes were tight with ghosts. Then Lily squinted at the men and declared, "Uncle Ethan tells funnier stories than Dad." It broke the surface. Ethan raised his glass to Nathan. "She chose you. Don't waste the choice." Nathan met it. "Thank you for standing where I couldn't stand yet." Glass met glass. No speeches. It was enough. Later, with Leo asleep and rain tapping a new rhythm on the gutters, Lily asked the question that belonged to her future. "What's Leo's last name?" Amelia looked at Nathan before answering. "Both," she said. "Hart and Cole, so nobody has to lose anymore." Nathan's face went wet in a way he didn't try to hide. "I used to think winning meant holding more," he murmured. "Turns out it means holding out your hand." Endure. Victor's funeral was brief and almost private, the way power looks when it's done performing. Nathan read a eulogy that refused to retouch history. "I was afraid of becoming a father, because I was afraid of becoming you," he said. "But for teaching me the force of forgiveness by its absence, I am strangely grateful." After the last handful of earth thudded soft, Amelia set a white rose on the grave. "You took a company from my father," she whispered, "and somehow gave me a man capable of love." No trumpets sounded. The air simply lightened. Work answered grief with purpose. The Hart Cole Foundation opened in a repurposed wing of the old plant. Scholarships for kids from the dry corners of the map, 2 interlocking drops of water on the door separate, joined. Journalists wrote their clever contrasts, and then found themselves writing about test scores and boreholes instead. "We don't have to erase the past," Nathan told Amelia at the ribbon, fingers brushing hers in public without apology. "We just have to be the ones who finish it right." She squeezed back. "Then we finish it every day." At dusk, the 5 of them walked the low hill above the research center. Below, the rebuilt stacks exhaled clean. "Are you afraid of anything now?" Amelia asked, rocking Leo against her. Nathan watched Lily chase the last warmth of light across the grass. "Only of running out of courage to love you in the way you deserve," he said. "When love's been through weather like ours, it doesn't need to be perfect," she answered. "It just needs to be true." The sun dropped, and in Leo's fist a plastic cup caught the final blaze. A small, bright circle trembled and held. They stood there until the light let go. 10 years later, dawn lifted over a desert that had learned to listen. On a low stage outside Dubai, Amelia Cole faced a crowd of engineers, farmers, ministers, and children lined up with empty jerry cans that would go home heavy for once. "Water doesn't have enemies," she said into the clear morning. "People either share it or forget what they are." Applause rose like heat. In the front row, Nathan, hair silvering, shoulders looser, smiled without needing to be seen. The children had become vectors of the future. 19-year-old Lily sent voice notes about lab deadlines and the problem sets that refused to behave. Her piano had become code, a different music. 10-year-old Leo wore a cap with 2 blue drops stitched over the bill and ran the perimeter with a bottle he insisted was for testing. "Did Hart and Cole really hate each other?" he asked, pausing long enough to hand his father a wrench, as if he'd always been part of the crew. "They did," Nathan said, tightening a valve. "If some people hadn't learned how to forgive, you'd still be thirsty." Leo didn't catch the history, but he caught the gratitude and nodded like a man. At lunch, a parcel arrived, stamped from Canada. Ethan's hand in the return address made Amelia's chest pinch in that tender, clean way old scars sometimes do. Inside lay a photo of a lake rinsed in northern light, and a brief letter. "Not all loves are meant to stay," it read. "Some are meant to help other loves become." If today is one of those days you built your own source, drink for me." She stood there a moment with the paper in her hands. Nathan found her like that and didn't flood the quiet with his own words. "He always understood you," he said. "And you," she answered, sliding the photo into her journal. "Finally understand yourself." They flew back to London for a day because closure prefers the landscape where it began. The old plant was now a museum with machines cut open to show their hearts, plaques that told the truth without vengeance, and a small glass case labeled Reconciliation Accord, 2018. Under it, an impossible photograph, Martin Hart and Victor Cole, young and alive in separate frames joined by a single mat. "If they were here," Amelia said, "they'd argue about who taught the grandchildren better." "Or they'd pretend to," Nathan said, "and drink tea like men who finally sat down." That evening, at a reservoir outside the new research center, they turned a valve together. The first rush through the filters caught the sun at an angle that made science look like worship. "Water once divided us," Amelia said. "Now it stitches us back." Nathan lifted her hand to his lips. "Not the water," he said. "You." She shook her head, smiling. "Belief. You lost it. We found it." The cameras panned wide. The sound the audience heard was water and wind, and people learning what hope weighs. Back home, Nathan opened his mother's old journal and wrote the last entry he would ever need. "I used to think greatness was the size of a thing a man could command. It's the size of the wound he's willing to tend, even when he caused it. Wealth can outlive you without loving anyone. Kindness is the only inheritance that remembers your name." He set the book beside a family photo, Amelia with desert grit on her cheek, Lily mid-laugh, Leo squinting into light, and added a line in smaller script. "For Amelia, water, light, and heart." Morning found them on sand near the new plant. Lily called, "Bring him here," and Leo sprinted wobbly in boots too big, the bottle sloshing. They poured a ribbon of water that curled across the ground to join their feet. For a heartbeat, the reflection held all of them, 2 adults who had learned how to stay, 2 children who had never learned how to leave. Amelia's voice, softer than tide, rose in the mind like narration. "We were drowning in what had already happened. Then the same element taught us how to float. Love is like water. It doesn't disappear when blocked. It finds another way." The camera of memory pulled back. Laughter braided with the hush of a working world. The sand darkened to the shape of a path, and the path led forward until the horizon took it in. Sometimes life doesn't give us what we want, it gives us what we need to grow. The storms, the silence, the waiting, they all shape us into people who can love deeper and stand taller. And when the sun finally returns, it feels warmer because of the rain we've walked through. If this story reminded you that healing takes time but always comes, share your thoughts below. Tell me where you're listening from tonight. Is it raining? Or has the sky finally cleared where you are? And if you believe that kindness can rebuild anything, stay with us, subscribe, and let's keep finding the light together.